Why do I never remember that? Welcome, everybody. The mayor again forgets to turn his microphone on, but this is a special work session for the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on Monday, November the 28th, post-Thanksgiving. We welcome everybody that's here in the audience. A couple of housekeeping things I'd like to start out with. Kind of the run of the show, my understanding would be that staff is going to have a presentation that they're going to make. I always leave opportunity for the board to ask questions about the presentation. After that, I'm going to ask Alan Thompson, who is speaking on behalf of the Development Services Advisory Commission, to make a report. And then after that, I'll have a number of speaker cards. I already have some. And I will be calling those folks up to make a comment, and we'll be using the podium, which is live tonight. If you plan on speaking, and I see a few people holding speaker cards, I would appreciate you bringing those to me now, because I'm trying to plan how we pace the meeting and things, and so I'd rather have those cards now. I generally don't start taking cards in the middle of the session when it's about to end or something like that. If somebody has a brilliant idea that they want to bring to me, now's the time to have your brilliant idea and give me your speaker card. So if you don't have a speaker card, they're right there at the podium. I'll give you a few more minutes since I'm just making that announcement. And you're welcome to bring them up to me. So saying that, this is a presentation on the proposed water and sewer impact fees. So.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion and have this work session tonight focused on.
You know, I forgot to do something, Mr. Stuckey.
Yeah.
I need to call the roll.
Oh, please do.
Yeah. How about the vice mayor?
Present.
Alderman Blanton.
Here.
Alderman Hanson.
Here.
Alderman Peterson.
Here.
Alderman Berger.
Present.
Alderman Brown.
Present.
Alderman Potts.
Present.
And Alderman Baggett.
Present.
And the mayor's here too. So everybody is here. Thank you, Mr. Stuckey.
No problem.
For letting me interrupt you.
And we'll kick this off with a staff presentation. I would guess our staff presentation is going to be somewhere around 15, 20 minutes to walk through. Elements of this is what we had planned to present to you a couple weeks ago. I did not have time in that session to do that, but we've also added some additional information to just provide some more context. Board members, depending on how long you've been on the board, have talked about this for the better part of 2 years, others better part of a year, and we know not everyone in our audience or watching this at home or wherever they might be has all of that background. So we're going to try to, without burdening the presentation too much, give some additional context about what it is and how it fits with our ability to plan for future capacity that supports the growth of this community and continuing to function and provide water and sewer services at a very high level. So I think Michelle's going to kick this off and walk us through this, and various ones of us up here will chime in on different elements of the presentation, and then glad to take any questions you have when we end up and go from there through the course of the evening, and look forward to hearing from you and from hearing from the community. So Michelle, take it away.
Thank you all for coming post-Thanksgiving Christmas holiday. So wanted to kind of, as Erica mentioned, kind of a conglomerate of all of the presentations we've done in the past. Kind of wanted to pull them all together as kind of suggested at the last work session, so we can kind of get a refresher of everything. So kind of why are we doing this? Why did we even start down this path, really? So right now the water department has recognized that meter size isn't really an equitable capture of the impacts to the system, right? So right now we talked about how we charge impact fees based off of your water size, right? It's not based off of the occupancy of your building. It's not based off of the building type that it is, right? A restaurant versus an office building, different types of impact to the system. So why should we increase the impact fees? So we have, as we build the capacity to accommodate the future, the growth that we see in our community, things cost more expensive, right? Things are more expensive. So we have increased pipe, pumps, facilities, et cetera, that are required for that increased capacity. This includes our current, so the impact fee portion of it includes the current treatment needs that we've done to plan for the future capacity needs, which is the water plant that we already undertook in 2018 that came online, and then the current facility on Claude Yates, and then the potential southeast facility is what we're looking to plan for. The future development drives the need for additional capacity, both in conveyance and treatment capacity. So overall, the purpose of the impact fees is to appropriately assign growth-related infrastructure costs to new development, and to reduce the cost burden on ratepayers to fund growth-related infrastructure, right? So we've talked about this multiple times. So a little bit of background. So currently, our impact fees, I just mentioned, are based off of our water meter size, right? So both water and sewer impact fees are based off of that. The meter size is an inequitable capture of the impacts to the system based off of the type of building occupancy that we can see. So we started with a question of how do we accurately and equitably predict those impacts to the system. Also, it's to note that we haven't increased impact fees for over 15 years, which is, as you can imagine, even within the past couple of years, that with inflation and just cost of living increases of maintenance, those have skyrocketed over that time. So keeping with that background information, this is the, bringing this as a refresher, this is how our current impact fee structure is, the stair step that we have is assessed, right? So those are our meter sizes. So right now, for a residential house, our water impact fee is about $2,100 and our sewer impact fee is about $3,500, right? But you can see, so the larger, the water meter gets, the more impact fee, but it's a very stair-stepped tiered approach, right? There's a lot of drive for development to undersize their meter so they can pay the lower fee, and there's no sort of recourse for that. So that's what we're trying to get away from, is how do we equitably assess those fees? Because even if you can undersize your meter, we're still getting the impacts to the system. We still have to treat, we still have to convey all of that flow. So the current methodology also discourages the use of fire suppression systems, obviously because you don't want to have a larger meter to account for those fire suppression systems. And let's see, so the overall goal was how do we appropriately plan for the impacts to the system? All right, so we looked at a lot of different ways. We looked at a lot of different municipalities, and how do we come up with something that is equitable to our community? So our distribution and conveyance systems are sized based on available capacity. So a single-family unit equipment is a factor of that available capacity. The diurnal demands that peak in the morning and the evening are based off of our typical residential usage, and we have a couple slides in here that'll go over that as well. So our system is sized based off of those peak demands. Your water consumption, your utility bills are based off of your total consumption throughout that month and then averaged throughout that 30 or 31 day cycle. So it doesn't account for those peaking demands. It's also important to note that we currently use, as we talked about, when we do offsite agreements, when we do any sort of availability for our system, we currently calculate availabilities based off of SFUEs, essentially. So it's based off of the capacity of the pipe. How many SFUEs someone is wanting to connect to the system. We evaluate that to make sure all of our treatment and our conveyance can accommodate that before we provide them availability. So this really isn't a new concept to us. We're just looking to make it more equitable to everyone.
An SFUE is single-family unit equivalent. So basically the planning number per household.
Is this the same slide? Oh, no, it's not. Okay. All right. So in the next slide, we're gonna look at what a diurnal curve is. But we size our system based off of available capacity. Diurnal demands, when we talk about a diurnal, it's 2 peaks throughout the day, so in the morning and the evening. So if you think about everyone waking up in the morning and going to work, you have a peak. Everyone uses water, everyone creates sewer. wastewater for us to put into the system, right? Same thing in the evening when everyone gets home. We have to size the system based off of those peak demands, not the average consumption throughout the month. If we size the system based off of that average demand throughout the month, when you wanted, your water to take a shower, you may not have it, right? Because it's based off of that lower demand. So we mentioned this before, the Tennessee Titans Stadium as well. So this is a good example of a diurnal demand that's a little bit skewed based off of normal, what we see residential uses, right? So Tennessee Titans is, 2 weekends in a month, right? And it's about a 4-hour time frame. So, you can track the diurnal demand based off of, the end of quarters or half times, right? When everyone's getting up and using the bathroom, right? We have to size the system we have to size the pipes based off of that demand, not of the average, over the 30-day period. Let's see, so I'll pass this over to Brian, who's going to talk about our community's examples of diurnal flows.
As Michelle just explained, when we size our infrastructure, we look at that diurnal flow, that typical diurnal flow that we're going to see in the system. Here are 2 examples of the West Haven flow meter that we have in our system. And as you can see, that pattern, that common pattern, you see the March 31st to April 1st, 2022 diurnal curve. And at the bottom, you see the November 16th, November 1st, 2022 lead part flow meter. So you see in those demands how common those diurnal curves look. We have to design a system to catch those peaks, and that's what we try to do. So in analyzing and looking at this information, the 350 gallon per day per square foot, 350 gallon per day per single family household is what we use and typically assess by. This was an actual study that was done by a third-party engineer in the West Haven. The purpose of the study was to determine on some piping that we felt was inadequately sized for the future development. And in that study, you can see the range. They measured 3 areas. So we had 2 areas of West Haven that measured 131.5 gallons per day per household with a range up to 437 gallons per day per single-family unit. Franklin Green, it averaged around 220 gallons per day per single-family unit. Again, just to reiterate, when you're looking at wastewater flows, you have that diurnal pattern, that wide variety of flow, and to show that the 350 that we're using per single-family unit equivalent is within the reasonable ranges that we see in our system.
So one thing to think about here too, we have West Haven because we have information from that neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we use the single-family unit equivalent measurement doesn't mean that's what homes are using in West Haven. It's collective, okay? So you have commercial spaces in West Haven that are probably using water at a much higher level. So that reflects they're probably greater than a single-family unit. But it gives you a sense of that 350 planning number is not overly exaggerated in terms of being high compared to what you actually see, especially a neighborhood like Franklin Green that is entirely single-family homes coming around at 220, but then you have a mix of uses and you see that range in West Haven. So that really affirms to us that the 350 is a pretty good planning number. It is also one that is pretty widely used in the industry overall. So just as a point of comparison, we kind of vet that against what we actually experience. And it is a planning number we've used for many, many years as well in terms of sizing our plants and that kind of work as well. So.
Okay, so, all right, so kind of going off the background off a little bit, we'll talk about kind of the definition of an impact fee. And this was also from a previous presentation as well, but from AWWA is a professional standard that we use. A lot of municipalities use it. It's pretty accepted across the entire sector. As far as
American Water Works Association.
As far as providing guidance on how some of these, how rates are developed, how rates are equitable, how impact fees are assessed, those types of, the type of utility work. So an impact fee is a contribution of capital toward existing or planned future plant facilities necessary to meet the service needs of new customers to which those fees apply. So there's 2 methods to calculate impact fees, which is the equity buy-in method and then the incremental cost method. And so here in Franklin, we're using a combination of both of them. Municipalities, depending on the age of their system and the development, they might use one or, more of one and less of the other, or they might use a hybrid as well. But those fees that are charged are intended to provide the funds to be used to finance all or part of the capital improvement project necessary for those new customers. So impact fees are it's a pretty standard approach toward new development in assessing those fees across the board. So I talked about the two types of impact fees. So there's the equity buy-in method, which assesses new customers a fee to approximate the equity position of current customers. So bringing those new customers into the playing field that all of our existing customers have invested in the system. So we use the equity buy-in on the distribution and collection system. The incremental cost method is what we use on our new treatment facilities. And so those are assigning new development the incremental cost of that system expansion that's needed. So we use that for the water plant, we use that for the current Claude Yates facility, and then the potential south facility as well. So we here in Franklin, we used a combination of the two to assess kind of our entire system. We use the actual number of Franklin customer accounts to kind of divide those costs, as I talked about the incremental cost method. And then the cost that we are using to assume the future expansion cost. So we'll go into kind of the development of the water fee, which is not as controversial. So you don't have as many slides on this one. So this one, I just have the hybrid summary results right here. So with the equity buy-in, which just covers the distribution system, is about $1,800, and then the incremental cost for the treatment is about $1,800 as well. So when you combine both of those, it's about $3,600, which on the next slide, it is just an increase of about $1,500 from our current impact fee. So this, when you look at kind of this inflationary number over the past 15 years, this is somewhat on par with where we should be after 15 years of growth. So for that one, we're recommending the full implementation of that one. And then when we get on to sewer, so we have the equity buy-in, which is what we've done, which is what the assessment for the collection system is, to bring those new customers into the playing field where all of the existing customers have bought into the infrastructure. And so that cost is about $2,400. And then we have two costs. Do you have a question, Alderman Berger? Okay. So then when you...
That
It's-
component, the
that
buy-in
component of
component
it.
is 2,400.
So we're
We're
combining
building
three
the
different
total
parts
number,
of it.
yeah.
So then we have the incremental cost for the existing treatment facility and then the incremental cost for the new facility. And so for the Claude Yates facility, as we talked about kind of in past presentations, we're only assigning 4 million gallons of that as a growth-related cost. So the other 12 million gallons are assumed to be the typical maintenance, operation of the plant, the upgrade of existing facilities. So that 4 MGD is assigned to the impact fees, and that's where we get, so using this projected cost, that's about $3,500.
Before you move off that slide, put a pin in that number, 3573. Just keep that in mind. When we talk about the recommendation from staff, that's going to be important to consider. So we'll come back to that and make reference, but that's an important piece because that's an investment you've already made in wastewater treatment capacity. We're completing that project upgrade and expansion that'll fully come online next year. So just keep that part in mind as we move through the more future looking is the third and final piece of this.
Let's also make a pinpoint on that second thing that says projected additional capacity of 4 million. How much, what is that amount of money that's associated with that?
$33 million. Plus
No, I'm
interest
talking about the
costs.
second- the
Plus
second-
interest costs, so it's $40.8 million.
But
The-
right under
the
that,
the
what's
next number
one?
down.
What's the next number?
The 1.46, that is the total of
But I mean-
SFUE capacity. It's not money. It is capacity.
Okay. That's capacity.
Okay, yeah,
That's
that's capacity.
Gallons,
That's your gallons per day, so that's how you get to your, average SFUE number at the bottom. You're essentially dividing that 40.8 by the 1.46 billion gallons
Yeah, that,
of treatment capacity that is dedicated to growth.
gallons per year, my apologies.
It's per year, yeah, per year.
Say it another way, we've already invested $3,573 currently in the new plant operation. We haven't accounted for that. Am I saying that?
I didn't catch the number you said, but.
3,573.
No, that is the allocation of growth-related capacity from the current project. So we're moving from 12 million gallons a day to 16 million gallons a day. And we're also enhancing some treatment processes along the way. We're adding a biosolid treatment component at the end of the process. But we're assigning the growth-related component of that $150 million plus project. We're putting $33 million plus financing costs, which takes it up to $40.8 million. You've essentially already committed and have spent or are spending that money between now and sometime next year when we bring it fully online. This is what we've secured the state revolving loan fund dollars for, et cetera, including, we've put some cash investment in it as well that's from previously collected impact fees. But we're taking a subset of that and dedicating it to new growth. And that's that $33 million plus financing costs.
Gotcha.
Okay, so moving on to the potential southeast clean water facility. So this is assuming an 8 million gallon per day facility. And what we've done is we've listed the costs that have gone into this cost assumption that we've done. These are preliminary, right? So I've listed the cost where I have contractors or consultants or what's known, where it lists TBD. That's what we don't know yet. So those have not been incurred. So for just the south plant capacity at an 8 million gallon per day plant is about $11,000, so $10,755. This includes, so it's important to note this all, much like the cost before this also includes the financing cost as well. So while we have every intention on getting applying for an SRF loan again with a lower interest rate, those aren't guaranteed, right? It's an application process, much similar to any other grant that we would potentially apply for. So we're assuming the full cost to recapture right now.
And those first three bullets are really costs that we know now, either we're under contract for those services or we have a hard number on those. The remaining bullets are our best projection that we think are justifiable estimates of those costs going forward, the biggest of which is a construction cost of $150 million for an 8 million gallon a day new plant.
All right, so looking at all of those costs together, when we combine it, so I talked about the three different cost factors that would go into that. So when you do the equity buy-in for the collection system, the incremental cost for the Claude Yates facility, and then the incremental cost for the potential new Southeast facility, that's where we get the $16,719 amount per SFUE. So our current impact fee is about $3,500, so this is about a change of $13,000. But this leads us into our next slide.
So this is our revised staff recommendation related to implementation. And it is essentially an equal 4-year implementation. So spread that cost over 4 years. That provides you with the opportunity to have that cost be absorbed over time, or have people have some time if they have projects in process that when they get to building permit or foundation permit, they could pay a cost, and those that are closer to moving forward can pay a lower cost as we phase this in. Obviously, in conjunction with this, we would recommend full implementation of the water fee. That is reflective of really what would be an inflationary adjustment, plus you have already made that plant investment and completed it in 2018. So you're really allocating what's appropriate on that to new growth. But this larger piece, we know the sanitary sewer is the one that really has raised the most question. Our recommendation is to phase that in over 4 years. That gives you an opportunity to both spread that cost out over time, give people a chance to adjust to that. It also gives you a chance to monitor how it's impacting development. We've heard that question is, will it have an overly negative impact on development overall? You can look at that. We bring a report to you every quarter about development activity. And while we know lots of factors play into that, we know there's a concern that this could have that impact. So it gives you the opportunity to revisit that or alter that timing of these 4 phases based on what you're really seeing occurring. That's another option. The reason I identified that second component, that 3,500, is I would suggest that you at a minimum do that in the near future, because you've already incurred that cost. You ought to build that into what you're allocating to new development and to a demand-based approach by moving away from the meter size and move to this single-family unit basis that really is an assessment of demand on the system and using that as our basis, as opposed to the artificial, how small a meter can you get away with using. But I think it's really important to think about at least taking that first step fairly soon, because that's an investment you've already made, so that development can start paying its fair share of that portion. And if you need more time to look at the remainder of that phase in, then use that time. But let's not lose time in recapturing what you've already spent. And that time can be used to do both more fairly allocate those costs, but if there's a desire to understand further implementation, we can use that in the meantime as well. So we'll come back to this slide at the end, but that's where staff is in terms of understanding that impact. We did spend time looking at, could you grandfather this or grandfather certain development approved at one time or another, and that just becomes very difficult, because then you are literally choosing winners and losers based on when they got their entitlement and how that works. And I just think you're better off providing the same rules and the same roadmap for implementation for everybody. And, it does create an incentive for those who are farther along to move their projects along and get in as soon as they can to take advantage of this opportunity to phase the fee in more over a longer period of time. And that would naturally create some benefit to those that are closer to going to development, which I think is some of what we've heard in some of the feedback or concern we've heard from you and from others in the community overall. So we'll do a couple more slides that address some of the questions around sizing, capacity, et cetera. And then we'll come back to this and answer any other questions you have. So.
Can we do, so the $68.37 is the current fee plus the
Yeah.
$3,500 that you're saying?
So, yeah,
that we have already spent
Yeah, so
on the enlargement and upgrading on the current
right,
treatment
so
plant?
I hope I didn't confuse that for everybody. So to go back through, the overall proposal is a $13,172 total increase from where we are today to what essentially the formula tells us it should be, based on our assumptions. So the proposal is to break that $13,172 into 4 components. It's just a tick under $3,300. So do that over 4 years is what staff's proposing at this point. I understand the concern that we've heard and the desire to maybe keep looking at this further. That can continue. But my request to you is to at least consider doing phase 1.
Yep.
Because it's pretty darn close to the number that you've already invested in doing the existing plant expansion and upgrade, which is a little over 3,500 or 3,572, I think is the number. So a little under 3,600, but it's pretty darn close to what phase 1 is. And just something for you to think about in terms of that phase in. The multi-year gives you the opportunity to continue to look at it and say, hey, we think we ought to hold off on phase 2 or phase 3 of this implementation at this time. That is always an option. We can even build that into a process over time, should the board desire. But the idea is to have this fairly and equitably assign the demand for service and the demand for new treatment capacity to where that demand is coming from, which is new development. And we're trying to do that as equitably as we can, moving away from the meter size, I think, and to something that's more the demand based on the system being the driving force behind it is also a key part of this discussion. So I'll stop there and make sure I've answered that question for you.
And,
Oh, go ahead, and I'll get Alderman Brown in.
and when do we expect the new treatment plant to be up and running?
Well, elements of it are working right now. There are aspects of it.
The Claude Yates facility?
No,
or
no,
The
The east
southeast.
side.
Okay, the
Southeast.
southeast, it's hard to give you an exact, I would say approximately 10 years from now.
Okay, so
Because
does-
you've got, we've got to do design, we've got to go through a lot of permitting elements. Of course, we've got bidding and construction. The construction of the upgrade and expansion we are in the midst of right now has been on the better part of 3.5 years. So, I mean, that 10 years will go pretty fast when you look at all you got to do a plant in this day and age.
And we've been dealing with the one we're dealing with for 5. So that's not, I mean, I don't want to call it aggressive, but that could be slightly aggressive. So the 16, 7, 19, all those numbers, if we finally implement those generate enough revenue to complete the southeastern wastewater treatment plant.
Well, it all depends on what comes through the process. What it does is it allocates the cost that we estimate to single-family units. It is a fair way to assign it by that unit of measurement as we move forward that estimates what would be a fair cost, in this case, for that unit to pay, and that will be allocated based on the type of development that is or type of building that it is. But it provides, it's a formula that equitably assigns that per development.
But assuming we can't look into the future that we're going to grow at 20,000 people per 10 years, you're going to have that number. You have to have that wastewater treatment plant online, ready to go. If growth continues to go at the rate it's gone since 1990.
Yeah, you have capacity that you've already built and are expanding.
Right.
And then adding this 8. So you move to 16, and then this would add another 8.
8.
Not just adding the other 8, but where you're adding the other 8, in the southern portion of the city where we're seeing a lot of new development. It will also allow us to move some existing development to the south plant and free up capacity at the existing plant that could help support development and redevelopment in the northern part of the city. So while most of the growth is happening in a certain area of the city, that's not the only place it's happening. And by doing this, you create capacity at both existing plant and new plant to meet those needs. And we design the collection system, conveyance system to support that and reflect those two locations as opposed to just one. Because if you continue at the plant you're at too, you're doing a lot of pumping as opposed to being able to use more gravity and stay in 2 different locations as opposed to just one.
I've got Alderman Brown, then I'll come to you, Alderman Peterson.
My question was similar to Vice Mayor's on timing. I'm going to go back one step. On the current 16 MGD that we're building, based on what's built or approved, not yet built, based on what we know today about what we have, how far will we be into that 16?
Well, in terms of all development,
Everything that's been approved so far, not yet built, what do we think we're into on that 16?
you're well into it. There's a little bit of unknown there because you have entitlements that were granted 20, 25 years ago that are likely not going to move forward. Okay, and we still grant sewer availability when those come back through a more specific development process. So there's still the ability to look at that. I can't give you a hard and fast because there is that element of uncertainty, but you have largely built to that, and we'll show you some specifics around that geographical area in terms of what's in the system now and what's reasonably projected that get you pretty close to that 8 million gallon a day capacity that we're talking about in the southeast. So some of that will be answered in a future slide. It's a little harder to say exactly what's approved but not built translates into,
Right.
because there is an element of uncertainty
I guess
around some of that.
What I'm trying to understand a little bit is if we're already into that capacity on current development that's been built, then we're going to be asking new development to pay for, with your suggestion of going ahead and at least addressing that incremental piece, then we're actually asking new development to pay for the usage of already approved development.
Well,
It's not just about the new development, it's going to be about, and the new plant. We got a plant, we're already using that capacity with the current.
But it's important to recognize, just because it may have been approved, it's new development until it pulls a building permit or a
Understood.
foundation permit. So it's not fair to say that that was something that was approved 8 years ago that hasn't
Gotcha.
pulled a permit.
They haven't pulled meters
Is
either.
getting a benefit that that somebody just got approved a month ago. They're really from this standpoint, on this topic, they're in the same place.
Gotcha.
They haven't moved far enough along where they're pulling a building permit or a foundation permit that triggers the actual payment of the impact fee.
Got it.
And that timing is a timing that actually was requested by the development community many, many years ago so that it could be kind of spread out over time and match a little more equally with the development process they're going through, the building process.
Alderman Peterson.
Let's see, just to say very briefly, our 12 million gallon per day is whenever it's completed, which is about when? Sometime next year?
Well,
It's
we
gonna
moved
have
from 12 to 16.
to six-
We're at
no,
12
no,
now.
wait, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, the 4 million gallon per day will be done this year, right?
It will be done
In 23.
in 23, yes.
2023,
Yeah.
okay. But whenever you think about an 8 million gallon per day new plant, that's basically half of what's going to, that would be the same as half of what we're using by 2023. I mean, that seems like, I know that we're talking about how many people that we're adding every 10 years, but still, that is a huge amount. I mean, a huge expectation that we would have half again as many, because we may have a lot of different water utility districts, but basically the city of Franklin does all the sewer.
That's right.
And so there are two different things there. But I'm just saying, it means that when would you anticipate the southeast plant coming online, and do you think that we're going to be grown by half as much as we have now?
So,
then?
and it's not just population growth, it's other non-residential type of growth that
Sure.
occurs. One of the things we did in the Integrated Water Resource Plan was look at growth and demand factors over time, over really a 30-year plus timeframe. And you may remember we had 3 lines. We had kind of a conservative growth, a moderate growth, and an aggressive growth projection. The reality of what we've seen is somewhere between that moderate and aggressive in terms of what we've actually seen. And we'll show you a little bit of permit and investment data later in this presentation. But that's been part of our reality. We have had our planning staff do some validation based on what's been approved, what's in the pipeline, what is reasonable to expect in land use. Of course, we made some modifications to what's going to develop in certain areas, tried to be thoughtful about that too, because the development environment's changed a little bit. Annexation laws have changed a little bit. And so all of that has been factored into what we've worked with planning staff on. One of the elements of the Hazen study that is underway now is to also go back and validate that again, looking at growth patterns and demands and see, is 8 million gallons a day the right target to be shooting for? All indications are that it is, from what we did in the integrated plan, what we've done, looking at it with planning staff. But, they could say 6 million. They could, and those could be adjusted. That's another part of the wisdom of maybe phasing this in over 4 years, because we can continue to refine that as time goes on. But that has been reviewed and continues to be reviewed. And we'll probably be reviewing that until we go to design, to where we're designing for bid documents and those kind of things, to just make sure we've thought all, that we're reflecting what the demands are now. But that does appear to be on track, and that appears to be what we're seeing. I shared this earlier today, but it's like, just because you've had some changes in what's likely to develop in certain land areas, but we've also seen higher density in some areas. We're seeing more demand for redevelopment in the Cool Springs area. So the dynamics have evolved as well. Some push and pull, some may lower certain demand factors, some may push it up, whether it's density or redevelopment demand in areas that we currently serve.
Well, if you go back to image 18, I think it's just either the one or, yeah, right there. If you look at that on the hybrid results, if you look at the equity buy-in, the incremental method, and then for the Southeast Clean Water Facility, that's $10,000 of the $16,000 that you're talking about, right there, with that one thing.
Yeah, it's a significant investment in a new plant. And we're putting a construction value on that of $150 million. I think that's a conservative number. It's an easily justified number based on our experience, and especially recognizing that we're going to be building it 8 to 10 years out. That's again something that, as you look at this, you continue to update based on the best information you have at the time.
Well, if you're talking about 8 to 10 years out, that would mean in one more census time, we're expecting to get half again as much as we have right now.
Well, you're not,
I mean, if
you're not building for just 10 years. You're
No,
building
I understand
for
that,
30
but I'm
and
just
40
saying,
years in the
I'm just
future.
saying,
Yeah, it's
10 year- that-
not a, this is not a 10-year decision. This is
Yeah,
a
okay.
couple generations worth of decision. You look at how long you've had the Claude Yates facility
Mm-hmm.
in place and the iterations it's gone through
Mm-hmm.
over 40 years. That's what you're talking about here in a Southeast plant.
Other questions or comments?
we
Or
can come back to
we
more
have a few
questions,
more
yeah.
slides.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we-
I think this next slide
This-
might
some of
help
this may help
clear
with
up-
some- yeah.
might clear up some questions. So right now, in the Red Wing Meadows neighborhood, we have our Red Wing pump station. We affectionately refer it to. That's where our demonstration facility is. What we intend to do is that is conveniently right across the interstate from where our new facility will be in the southeast area. So what we intend on doing is kind of taking all the flows that go to that station and diverting them to this new facility. The great thing about that facility is that there are 3 interceptors. There's 3 large interceptors that go into that pump station. There's the Ascot Lane, the Simmons Ridge, and the Ladd Park interceptor is the newest one. We have flow meters on each of those 3 interceptors that can show us the actual flow that's going through those. And so that's what we have listed up here. But as we talked about those diurnal flows, right? So we have the average flow that we pulled, but then we also have those peak flows that we see. And so you can see those peak flows vary quite a bit. So when we add all of those 3 flows together, we get about 0.64 million gallons a day, right? Which when we add the peaking factor to account for those large flows, that's where we get it's a little bit larger, right? That's where we get the 1.28. That's still not the peak that we actually see through those 3 interceptors, right? We summed up the availabilities. So I talked about the SFUE model that we have, the availabilities that we've already approved for that area that have not been built yet, and that's 1.93 million gallons. So when you add both of those up, that's where we get to the 2.6 million gallons would be the initial flow to that facility, right? So what Eric talked about, what's going to happen is when we take a lot of those flows and divert them to the south facility, that's going to now increase open up capacity at the north at the Claude Yates facility, which will accommodate that development from Cool Springs and those areas. So it's really kind of based geographically where the flows are going to go, but the entire system as a whole is going to benefit from a potential new facility, right? We're looking at the entire system as a whole. Eric had also mentioned that, we're evaluating, so as the Goose Creek study with planning is going on right now, we intend to piggyback on that and to look at, and to look at the flows in this area. It didn't make much sense for us to kind of work in a silo as that study was going on because they were joined together quite a bit. So we intend to kind of get on the tail end of that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that costs are not necessarily a linear relationship, right? If we build an 8 million gallon facility for 150 million, a 4 million gallon facility is not going to cost 75 million, right? There's going to be, it may cost an increment less, but it's not going to be half, right? So the decision on whether or not the 8 million gallon facility is appropriate, it really, while it matters, we have time to kind of delineate that a little bit further and to further refine that as we get into that. The intent right now is to start banking those fees so we can reduce that ratepayer demand. Yeah, do you have questions on that one?
Be you said it's not half. I'm not going to hold you to it, but it's 30% less from 4 million versus 8 million. You said it's not going to be
It's not a linear, not a one.
It's not a linear, but is it?
Right.
Is it 100 million? Is it?
Yeah, I think that perspective, and if you don't have the answer now, I think that
We
would
have
be an
to.
interesting.
Do you know?
I mean, off the top of my head, I don't. We can
No,
get
that's
the
fine,
numbers
but
based
I
off
think
of
it's
our current
important to this
facilities
conversation.
together.
I think that's a really important number. I really do, because if we're talking, a lot of this is going back to the capacity needs for the future, and I think that's a really important number. Because if we're talking of this 200 and some odd $1 million facility, if to build an 8 million, it's, 40 million more dollars, or it's 40 million less to build a 4 million than an 8 million. I don't know. I think that's the scale that I think would be kind of helpful to know.
And then how quickly are you back into needing to
Right.
do an expansion? Those are the things to consider.
I think that would be an important number to know.
And with this phase plan, we have time to be able to do that, right? So and it's not something that we're going to completely work in a silo and forget. It's fully intended on with this phased approach. Eric mentioned we've got time to modify and to pivot if we need to, based off of more information. As we get further into design, those costs are going to get refined, and we're going to start narrowing those down a bit more. And
again, it doesn't have
based
to be
off
like
market
specific.
conditions.
I mean, this is just directionally accurate, so we're knowing what kind of percentages.
Yeah, we can get you some kind of range.
We can pull
Yeah.
an estimate together, but it'll be a broad, high level estimate.
I think if we get word back from the consultant that it's going to be a reduced volume, I would anticipate it would be at least a 6 MGD. Because what we're looking at right now, what's currently on the books in terms of availability and the flow that would get diverted to this newer facility, we're at 64% of a 4 MGD plant. 80% you need to start planning process again, and that's based on what we have approved today. So I would expect it to be larger than a 4. 8, that's what we're having. That's what we're digging into. So just wanted to share.
So one of the kind of the questions at one of the last work sessions is kind of what we've done to kind of work through some of this with our peers. And so we it's quite lengthy. We listed all of the work session presentations we've had, which has been quite a bit. In Civic Clerk, I'm working on the second line. Angie's gonna love me. So we also earlier this year we presented to the design developers group the initial concept of it, the methodology change, and then last month. Shortly, the day after the November 8th work session in which we got deferred, we presented to the Development Services Advisory Commission as well, with Alderman Brown was there. And that's where we presented the phased approach as well. And we also are beginning conversations with our BNS department of how that would be implemented and how that would affect the community, so we can start to, we have that information available to present to you in the quarterly updates as well.
So one of the questions that was posed would be is if we didn't do an impact fee, what would the impact be on ratepayers? We did a rough calculation. This would be really the cost to pay for debt service on borrowing the entirety of the project cost. And that impact would be $25 to $30 per customer per month. We would, if this, now, we haven't gotten feedback from you all that this is what you want to do. But this was a question that was posed. Our current ratepayers. All of them. Yep. Again, this has not been a
The
recommendation.
typical residential
typical,
ratepayer.
yes.
So, yeah.
So that would total about $300 to $360 per year, depending on what the interest rate would be. It's 150 million, 3.5% to 5%. Those were, yes.
In addition.
This I don't want to interrupt, but this is related to one of my other questions, which is, I think it's important for us to know here that, well, I don't know, I guess, these impact fees, how much money will it generate? We're not going to pay for this 100% from impact fees.
No.
So there would be the bond debt that we would have on the remaining would still go to ratepayers.
It really depends on the timing of these impact fees and when they come in over time. So,
Like cash flow.
yeah, the impact fee really is, you look at the 350 gallon unit, divide that into 8 MGD facility, at least we're at 8 MGD presently, and it's that incremental cost of each bit of 350 gallons a day flow that, so each impact fee, so if you attribute the entire cost, or if you're able to recover impact fees from all of the additional flow, then it would pay for the
The
new
debt
facility,
service.
including debt service, based on where we are in terms of estimates today.
So this is, again, I mean, kind of brings up why it's extremely important that we don't do something that stalls growth. because because this is what happens if, and I don't think we're here where this will stall growth completely. But certainly the impact to ratepayers could be, it could not just be paid by impact fees should development cease in certain projects. It's not going to cease, but it will slow. And so we could be looking at, and that's and I know there's no way to study this, I've been told, or we don't have a consultant that does this, I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, I think that's one reason why we're here is because if we miss the mark and add too many fees and it does slow growth, that's right, this is where it's going to pay for the facility. So this is where it doesn't come out anywhere else. It comes out of the ratepayers. I think that's why this is.
But you're looking at a pretty long continuum there. It's not just a short period of time. It's a long continuum, and we're going to be able to monitor with our quarterly reports what's happening.
And would we increase are we going to possibly quarterly increase impact fees or annual to
I'm just
address
saying
that if we
gives
have a
us the
shortfall?
opportunity. What you're talking about is development slowing, and we would be able to identify that trend from our quarterly reports.
And then
I
if
think
we
on-
didn't want that to fall on the ratepayer, we would have to increase fees further then, so that the ratepayer wouldn't have to pay it to, I mean, I guess that's the
You're going to
conundrum
need
we
to
would
keep
be
looking
in.
at these fees on a regular basis.
But that's the conundrum we would be in, is that we would have implemented fees that stalled growth, and then if we didn't want to impact the residents and their rates, then their only mechanism for us to do that would be to increase the fee. I mean, there's no other way. You're going to pass it along. to
Yeah,
the ratepayer.
you've got a bill you've got to pay. And you're either assigning it to development, future development, or you're assigning it to existing ratepayers. The reality is it's going to be some blend, just because the timing of any of these projects and
For
when
sure.
they happen. And I hear the concern about how it can stall development. But what really stalls development is not having sewer capacity. So that's what we're trying to weigh out, is getting the capacity in place at the right time that you need it to support both what's in the system today and what's coming, so that we can continue to serve at a really high level and support what our community expects of us.
And maybe,
It is an enterprise fund. We can't put taxes in it.
Yeah.
We shouldn't put taxes
No.
in it. And you can't.
You bring up a good point. So then this is why I think we keep talking about it, is that to protect the ratepayer, maybe limited capacity is one way to ensure that.
Well, limited capacity,
You said- you s-
it depends. You may also be hurting some of your other goals related to supporting positive development that you want to see in the community. You also may be paying more per capacity over time and really working against your goal of keeping this as affordable as possible, just depending on when those happen.
It's timing.
It is timing, and it's what
Crystal
you can
ball.
expect to happen
No,
related to
understood.
it, and it is a crystal ball. There's not somebody that's going to give us a definitive answer, but we're trying to assign it and give you the policy choices as best we can, but they're limited. 'cause
And you're
the
doing a great
nature of-
job, by the way. I think we're wrestling, some of us are wrestling with some of this is what we're supposed to do, because we represent the citizens and the ratepayers, and it's not a small situation. And so thank you all for being
Yeah.
patient with us. This is not, you've done a great job with the process, but
No, again, pulling the trigger on a 8 MGD or 6 or 4, that's the big question. And if we build it too early, yeah, we may be paying for assessing charges to developers too soon, and we have additional capacity that goes unused. So that's the balance. I believe 4, based on what we've seen with the planning department, is probably low. But so we're going to work that problem and talk with you all as we work through it, and we'll go from there. So.
I've got Alderman Berger, then Alderman Potts. So go ahead, Alderman Berger.
Sure. I remember when we bought that land down there, let me ask you, there's a couple of things. So the southeast plant, whatever we build there, we will expand eventually, but how much room is there for expansion in that land mass area that we have?
We reserved enough space based on what we anticipate the technology to be to go up to 16 MGD.
16? Okay,
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
all right.
I'm sorry, it won't have a solids, we won't have a solids process there. So the solids
Right,
processing
yes,
we're
it'll
building
be-
at the Claudia Yates facility will cover
Cover
both
it all.
plants.
It's built to, the
Sure.
capacity
Yeah, I
is
wanted
there
to
to
make
handle
that
all
Yeah,
that.
we understood that. So what I'm not hearing here tonight is, and we haven't gotten to that point yet, but have we discussed, I mean, we're pretty good at this, of looking elsewhere for help. We've been very good with that through the years. But in this instant, what do we know that, obviously I've not heard if there's any help at all or any programs or any help from the state, is that correct? Number 2, are there any tools that we might, now, I've thought about a PID, the Public Improvement District, I know about those, but people brought up MUDs and TIRZs and other things. So my question here is, if the state doesn't provide any of those tools for use in our state by municipalities, what kinds of programs, or are there none, that help us with these kinds of things? And is it worth our while, I know some of you all brought this up as well, about a MUD or a PID, and again, I was only familiar with the PID before, but I've heard of municipality and utility districts, of course, but I didn't know how they would be used in this sense. And TDIs, I don't think those would be used here, but I think, TIF, rather, I don't think that would be used here. I don't think you could use that here at all
Illegal.
with this utility. But then the TIRZ, the tax increment reinvestment zone. So do we have any of those tools in the toolbox? And if not, are they worthwhile to take a look at those tools and see other municipalities obviously use them? I know Texas does. And they're probably one of the states, I think, that uses them quite often. So do we take a look at that and then go to the state, if that's a tool we could have at our for our use and get something like that implemented on a state level. So could we speak about
Yeah.
some of those things?
So we've done some preliminary review. I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers on those.
Right.
But a couple things just from that initial review and thinking on it. First of all, you mentioned tax increment financing.
Yeah.
That's a no-go because you're blending in property taxes with your utility operation. Can't go there. But these other elements, for the most part, really seem to be kind of relying on identifying a district, like a geographical area. And I'm not sure that that's a great fit for what we're talking about, because while a lot of our growth is in a certain area of the community, that's not the only place that it's happening. As I referred to you before, we see redevelopment happening in Cool Springs and other areas that put some pressure on it as well, and allow us to divert what's going to the existing plant to go to the new plant that adds available capacity to serve that geography. So it's really a cost and a burden that you share across the service area, across the community, because of the nature of it, and you try to assign it based on some equitable basis to new development, which is going to happen in different places, in different pockets across the community. More so in some areas than others, but a lot of these seem to rely so much on a geographical area that doesn't have service today that you're taking service to. We have some of that, but we also have other things going on because our community is not all new. It's got a lot of existing development and redevelopment that may happen in those zones that we want to try to be able and ready to support. So, like I said, we can explore those further. Not sure of the legality of any one of those. So many of them, though, are kind of district or geographically based, which takes us to almost like a special assessment type of district, which we have done in neighborhood bases that assign those costs. Some of these also rely on almost a differential in rates from the way I understand them. That could be really challenging too, where you're providing the same service but charging different customers different rates because of where they live. That doesn't seem to be a great fit either, when you may be better off assigning that cost, as this model does, more upfront to the development as opposed to putting it on customers in the future. Those are all kind of policy dynamics. Like I said, I don't want to pretend that we have explored every nook and cranny of those options. We can continue to look at that, but I would really have reservations about something that is entirely like geographically based, which so many of these are districts. That's what the D is in those, is they're districts, and you're trying to assign a cost to just one portion of your community, when this really is more about new development putting additional demands on your system. And that is not limited to a geographical area.
Okay, so let me ask, even though it may not be geographical area, I wonder if there is a mechanism to allow it, rather than going to a per se district, that it could be assigned to new development that actually gets serviced by the new plant. So if you're in Cool Springs, in an area, or down by Berry Farms area or whatever, but it's all going down to the new plant, then that creates that new plant district, rather than the district being the development itself, but being the use district. Maybe a use district we should look into.
Well, that still has the same issue, whereas there's, like, a redevelopment in Cool Springs is not going to this plant.
Well, you mentioned that.
It's going to Claude Yates.
Okay, but you did
Because
mention
we're,
that.
right, that's what I said.
Oh.
I'm going back over that.
No,
So,
you mentioned, you mentioned.
I didn't say it was going to the new plant. I said it frees up capacity at the existing plant to go to Claude Yates.
Oh, okay.
And you're shifting existing capacity that's going to the northern plant, the existing plant, down to the new plant. So you're creating capacity at the existing plant to serve redevelopment or new development
Yeah.
that's in that geographical area, that's more easily and readily served, especially by gravity sewer, into those areas.
So all that stuff from Red Wing
Yeah.
is not going to go to
It
Claude
would be-
Yates. It'll
it would
go to
end
the
up
new.
going to the new plant.
And so then Claude
That's why
Yates
we
has
showed you
more
that.
availability
Yes,
because it's
That's
yeah.
the new district.
So essentially, what's going there today in those examples would go to the new plant, which essentially creates capacity at the existing plant to support new development in other areas of the city,
I wonder if we could classify
because it all fits together.
But I wonder if we could classify it like a use district rather than a geographical district, because, you know, you're not gonna take something way up here and put it way down there. You are going to have somewhat of a district, but it may be a little scattered, but it could be more of a use district. I'd like to look into something like that. And then, new development paying more, you said something about putting the burden on new development paying for, I think, what was it you said?
Oh, you talked about, some of these involve a rate differentiation,
just
meaning a
mentioned
higher
that,
rate
yeah.
for
Somebody's
those
paying
that might
$100,
be served
yeah.
in a newer development than what is paid by other customers elsewhere.
So.
So it's a way of shifting that
is-
cost, not from the development itself, but to the end
Well,
user.
I would question, I'm not saying I totally agree with this, but I would question, is that so wrong? Because new development is paying for itself, and you are moving into a whole new area, greenfields mainly, which are being developed, and they're creating a need for service. So they are essentially making, they're the catalyst of pushing that forward. So would they not, you know, if somebody's paying more in that area versus somebody way over here that's, you know, a regular user, has been here for a long time and being serviced, you're saying, you know, to differentiate the amount may be unfair. I'm not sure that would be unfair. I don't know.
You just may have some questions. That's a policy question for you
Yeah, I
to
would
think
say
about.
there might be some room for discussion of that.
And you're,
Certainly.
again, this is about how you're dividing the bill. Instead of that being paid at the building permit, foundation permit, timing, as part of that development, you're saying, we're going to push that cost even farther out and assign it to customers, not to the development itself.
Oh, they're gonna
That's
pay
the
for it
That's the
regardless.
policy, in that scenario.
Well, they're
That's
gonna-
kind of the policy choice you're making.
Well,
We can
they-
certainly explore that. I'm not sure how that math works out, because you're doing a different time
Yeah.
assignment, how quickly things get absorbed. It's
time
a little more
assignment and
difficult.
everything. Yeah, you're
And,
right.
Yeah, it's
But
even more of a crystal
The
ball.
ratepayer, regardless, is going to pay that.
Well, it's about when you pay it.
Yeah, of course.
Do you pay it
but-
up, do you pay it up front
Yeah.
at development, or do you pay it over years and
Incremental.
years as you pay your sewer bill every month
Yeah.
over that period of
Yeah,
time?
that is
Yeah.
certainly the question.
I'm
Okay.
going to interrupt just a
I'm
second
done.
if I could. Okay, thank you. I do have Alderman Potts, and one of the purposes of the meeting was to make sure that we had public input, and I want to make sure we have some time, so,
And we have about 5 slides we wanted to cover, or 4 slides that we wanted to cover still.
go ahead, Alderman Potts, and we're going to cover those 4 slides, and then I'm going to go to these.
I think that's well said, Mr. Mayor. That's exactly where I wanted to go. When we started, we said the presentation was going to be approximately 20
Yeah.
minutes. About an hour and 10 minutes. And I want to make sure
That's
that.
usual, that's the usual timing.
Yes, many, no, this is all comment, is I respect and value all of the questions that have been asked. Many of them were on my list. But I also want to make sure that we leave time for those that do want to speak this evening. So I'll defer my questions either to a later date or later in the evening. So if we've got time to go ahead and get these last few slides in and move to public.
And it's okay to share those questions you may have that don't get asked tonight with staff so they can research those. So go ahead with the next 4 slides.
So real quick, one of the things we heard concern about, and it came in some of the discussion we've had already, is just the impact of impact fees overall on development in general. This is just some history over the last decade or so, and some comparative points of what is in our environment in Williamson County. The school impact fee was implemented in 2017. That ranges from $3,000 to $12,000 per single-family household. That has been absorbed in this process. We've had a number of iterations where we've modified our impact fees for roadways. We doubled it in 2011, moving from 2,000 dollars, a little over $2,000 to $4,200. We did phase that in over 3 years at that time. In 2014, we also adjusted that further based on our studies and implemented that immediately. That has an upper end of about a $17,000 impact fee on our highest volume user, which is a fast food restaurant, on road impacts. In 2017, we also implemented a collector impact fee for roads, collector roads, which had not existed before. Again, a new impact fee. We implemented that in 2017, about $3,300 for single-family home, based on types of use, about $11,800 for fast food restaurant, which is the higher traffic generator. Point of comparison, neighbor of ours to the south, Thompson Station, is charging per single-family unit a lower capacity per unit. So that translates into a higher EDU count or single-family unit count of 250 gallons per day. Their combined number is over $16,000 for that fee. And then just as another point of comparison, a typical septic system is somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 per household, just in terms of an upfront cost. That's just some numbers we tracked from Williamson County, just to give you, again, a point of comparison of how these rates compare to some other elements. And then just looking at development activity since 2016, you see both the number of permits and the construction value of those permits. We've seen some impact. I think it's hard to say that we have seen a significant chill in impact as we saw some of those fees go into place when you see construction valuation anywhere from $500 million to $800 million in a year. This year alone, we are tracking well towards $800 to $900 million of construction valuation in this calendar year. So those elements don't seem to have really chilled development significantly in the last 5 to 6 years. Generally, we've had other things going on, obviously, in the world in that time period that may have also had an impact as well. But it just gives you a point of comparison.
So yeah, so this, for this last slide, I think it's this.
Next
it's
slide.
almost our last slide. So there was
28 slides does not equal a 20-minute presentation.
It could have.
we've kind of developed some things. So there's been a lot of questions that have been surrounding this. We kind of developed this FAQ sheet that's attached to the Civic Clerk item that outlines some of those questions. But we developed the SFUE calculation handbook. That's not been published yet. It's not been published yet, but it attempts to outline some of these assumptions and create clear calculation methodologies. So we're not doing this in a vacuum. It's not some water secrets that we're doing. We've developed this methodology using International Building Code, that's been adopted by VNS. The TDEC design criteria are basis for flow and loading, and then also Nashville flow loading factors. So we've looked at those other municipalities, and we've we've not massaged the data, but we've taken from all of those and selected what's most appropriate for our community. One of the questions was, when are the fees are going to be assessed? So they're assessed at the building permit issuance, and that's where we're going to capture the most descriptive nature of the occupancy of that building, right? So not when you're submitting your initial development plan. And then one of the things that we did talk about was other funding mechanisms. So we do intend to look at the state revolving fund loan with the lower interest rate. But once again, that's something we can only apply for when we get to that point. Like, we need to submit plans, we need to submit all the specs. That when we get to that point, we intend to pursue that.
And we do pursue looking at if there are grant opportunities. We have not seen them for these types of projects. It just has not been something we've seen to this point, but we'll continue to look for those as they present themselves. But it's not something we can count on at this stage. So the last two slides really just reiterate the recommendation that it is my recommendation and our staff team's recommendation to do the adjustment on the water impact fee, to move that up to $3,600 per single family unit. and that we implement the 4-year phased-in approach related to the sanitary sewer component. So we already kind of went through that and talked through that, so I'll stop with that, and we're glad to answer any further questions or open it up to the public and other discussion. So thank you for your time and attention, and sorry we didn't quite hit the 20-minute mark.
All right, and I think we're going to go ahead to public comment, and I want to hear from Alan Thompson, who's speaking on behalf of the Franklin Development Services Advisory Commission. So, Alan, if you'll, I'm going to try to allow people 3 to 5 minutes. I know some folks may take a minute, and some people may want a little more, and I'll try to be cognizant of being somewhat forgiving.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, and good evening to members of the board. Alan Thompson, I serve as the Vice Chair on the Development Services Advisory Commission. On November 9th, I served as the Chair due to the absence of Dwight Kaiser, who is our current Chair. On that meeting, we were presented by Ms. Hatcher a lot of what you're seeing tonight. There's been some additional information since then added. But it was basically focused primarily on just the sewer and water impact fee and the proposed increase. We wanted to be fully transparent that our Development Services Advisory Commission is made up of consultants, contractors, attorneys, real estate agents, and Alderman Brown also sits on that committee as well. We want to be transparent because a lot of the projects that were used as examples were some projects that we've worked on. We felt like that was important to state that because this commission was intentionally designed this way so that you'd have a holistic view of both the city and the development community when bringing issues such as this to us. That said, we understand growth. We understand the city of Franklin has never run from growth or turned its back on growth. It has, unlike other jurisdictions, has said, we're going to embrace growth, but we're going to tell it where to go, what to look like, what it will look like, and how it's going to be integrated into our community. And with that spirit, we understand growth also has growing pains. Part of those growing pains are needed infrastructure. Ms. Hatcher did a very good job of presenting the project, the needs of the project for future growth, of which Franklin has always been ahead of growth as opposed to trailing behind growth. Also was very thorough in the understanding of the cost for that infrastructure and what it would cost to construct it and to bring it online. So we completely understood both the need and the cost. We understood the phasing of the fees, or the proposed phasings that you see before you tonight. We did have some questions concerning the formulas for the impact fees, and we asked those questions during that time. We had a question for formulas per use, such as how it was estimated for an office use, which is going to be one of your lower uses of your sewer system. However, it had a very high fee associated with it. And then we had concern about the actual cost of the fees. And when you look at the cost as an individual unit, like we see before you on the screen here, $16,000 for a particular single-family unit, okay, that's expensive, but it can be absorbed by a single-family unit, one home at a time. If you look at how that's implemented for a multifamily unit, whether that's rental or whether that's for ownership, a big component of the Envision Franklin in promoting growth towards the arterials, if you look at that, those become very hefty fees. Fees that grow from $650,000 to north of $4 million. So I think understanding that impact and how it could impact the development community from that standpoint, which inherently could impact how you focused on planning for the city itself. So from our perspective, we felt comfortable with the need is there. the infrastructure has to be built. There's a cost associated with that infrastructure. It's how to absorb that cost and how the city works in concert with the development community, which is done for the 30 years that I've been coming down to the city of Franklin. The decisions making by this board and the development community working in concert, not always agreeing, but working in concert is what's made this city the great city that it is today. And I feel like we'll completely come to a solution that works for all here. But I think from the assessment of our board, we couldn't necessarily give a true recommendation because we didn't feel like we had enough information on the impact of the development community. So we really wanted to have more engagement with them, which we're seeing here tonight. And so we appreciate this opportunity. We feel like this is moving a step in the right direction and would like to hear some of the aspects of what the development community brings us tonight. I'm happy to answer any question or I can move on.
Yeah, let's continue to move on.
Okay,
If we can, and we can come back to you, Alan, and I appreciate your leadership there. I have, I'm going to call out 3 names: Caroline Mullen, Ralph Knaus, and Adam Balash. They'll be our next speakers.
Good evening. Excuse me. I'm Caroline Mullen. I'm the Executive Director of NAOP, which is the Commercial Real Estate Trade Association here in town. We sent over a letter detailing our concerns that we have with the fee proposals, as well as some, sorry, I'm not. We sent over a letter detailing some of our concerns, as well as alternative funding options. And as a national organization, we were just really hoping that you'll use us as a resource. We have gotten many examples of how this is being done across the country. And so we just wanted to let you know that we're here, and we hope that you'll work with us as you continue to make these decisions. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
We have whiskey and vodka, but no water.
Thank you, Mayor and Board, for giving me a few moments to stand up here and speak. The discussion today has been, I think, very good by the presentation by the staff, the discussion and the questions by the board. But I really want to reflect on something Alan said just a moment ago. I think the solution to what you're trying to solve as far as having future sewer capacity has got to be a holistic approach. A portion of it should come from the development community, certainly. But a portion of it should also come from the consumers that are using it. And another portion maybe needs to come from some of the other ways to fund government. And I really think you're asking the right questions, and we appreciate you asking the right questions, but I would certainly ask and plead with you, having developed here now for over 25 years myself, to take the time to make the right choices and make the right decision as to how you share those costs and how you grow sewer capacity and how it works in concert with the development community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Balash with Boyle Investment Company. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Have a handful of questions and would also just like to compliment everybody for having the opportunity to come speak tonight. Wish we would have had the opportunity to do this earlier over the last year and a half, 2 years. There was a great amount of information that was put out to a group, so to speak, of the development professionals Wednesday morning. I believe we got that on Sunday, so tried to pour over that in great detail today. So have a few questions from that, and then would just really like to have the opportunity to have an ongoing dialogue with staff and aldermen as this progresses. I'll try to be brief on these, but it seems like most of these calculations and assessments are based off of a 10 to 12 year plan, or 10 to 12 year old plan in the Integrated Water Resource Plan. That most of the information was generated in 2010 and then published in 2012. The document that was shared with us was labeled draft. I assume it's the finalized approved version. But one of the documents in the appendices, figure 4-12, suggests that by 2040, the potential peak monthly wastewater demand is only about 12.5 million gallons a day. So I know this is a 10-year-old report, but obviously that number is quite a bit different than what we seem to be planning for. If we've got 16 plus 8 at 24, do we truly need to double the capacity, or are these numbers just wrong, if that's what the report's based off of? The second question that I am still very shaky on, and forgive me, math may not have been my strong suit, but is really what is comprising the overall costs that you're trying to solve for. So there was a report or a presentation that staff gave in March or April of 2021 that generated a lot of these numbers. Those numbers have changed just ever so slightly, primarily due to some changing cost on the Southeast water plant or sewer plant, but pretty much everything else is the same of what was presented a year and a half ago. From that March 23rd, 2021 report, one thing that I'm just really not following is the math that goes into what is called, in both cases for the water and sewer, the incremental cost method, and why we are charging for what appears to be existing infrastructure. I get that we're trying to charge for the new plants, whether it's the upgrades, but I don't fully understand what we're capturing. In some of these cases, it says distribution plant value, 59.5, less contributed capital, less distribution bonds and grants, to a current investment and distribution plan of 37 million. When you divide that by the same number that is shown in the equity buy-in method, which is 94,000 SFUEs, that math works when you divide out the new incremental costs. But anyway, there's to show in kind of full how those numbers are calculated would be great. When that was presented tonight, those numbers weren't shown. It was just kind of the total number of 3624 for water, and kind of same thing on the sewer. So would really like to understand how you're getting to those numbers as you move forward. A clarification on the Claude Yates cost and the water treatment plant cost of about $2.5 million on the water treatment plant and about 41 million on Claude Yates. The numbers that I've heard historically were much larger than that. So I would assume that those are only the overages above the original budget. No? Okay. So I think some clarification on what's assigned to growth. So I guess one of the confusions that a lot of us have is that for years we've been paying into a model that's roughly a combined like $5,300 when you combine sewer and water. Is where did those numbers go? What was that used for? We thought that was being used to fund the cost, and these plant upgrades are not new. These have been programmed for at least a decade, if not more. So to understand what the incremental cost add would be and why we're jumping up, in some cases, hundreds of percents and multipliers there. The next question, I've got kind of two more general topics, Mayor. I'll try to be brief. You mentioned it earlier about the actual calculation of the 350 gallons per day as the SFUE equivalent. A lot of folks have spoken towards the West Haven pump station at the 131.5 gallons per day that is being modeled there. Columbia just updated went through this exact same process. A little bit older housing stock there that aren't, quite on the newer building criteria, and theirs is at 265. So obviously there's a huge jump if we were at 350 and what's being modeled compared to 250. So that denominator changes. Obviously the product there changes quite significantly. So would really ask to hone in on that. And then finally, looking at the funding alternatives. So obviously, as I just said, the costs go down considerably if you're dividing by 250. And in that example of an 8 million gallon plant divided by 350 gallons, that's like 23,000 SFUEs. If you divide by 250, it's almost 32,000 SFUEs. So obviously that quotient there jumps way up, and hopefully Ms. Peterson as a math teacher can help check some of my stats here. But I think the one last thing I'll share, and Alderman Berger was speaking towards this a little bit, that I just wanted to emphasize on as we start looking at these alternatives. NAOP, as well as a PAC that's been created called Build Tennessee is working with NAIOP, the Home Builders Association, and the state to possibly pass legislation that allows for some additional funding mechanisms that the municipalities in the state of Tennessee can use. Not that the city would have to adopt those, but obviously, in some cases, they're not even allowed at the state level right now. In the examples of a district, however you want to define that, I wanted to give one quick example. At Berry Farms, and just looking at the entitlements that we have not built yet, so what's to come, as well as looking at the Goose Creek area study that's being done now that's proposing roughly, 5,000 new residential units and like 1.5 million square feet of commercial space. Currently, as an example, I live in downtown Franklin and I'm in the Franklin Special School District. I pay approximately $2.75 as my millage rate per thousand. Outside of FSSD in Franklin, it's about $2.15. So as an example, at Berry Farms, if I were to increase taxes by 50 cents on new development only, at Berry Farms and the new Goose Creek area alone, based on current assessments, not increasing assessments as you go along, over a 30-year period, that would generate $240 million from just those two areas, Berry Farms and the Goose Creek Basin. That does not include any of the other opportunities, Eric, that you mentioned for redevelopment or new development in greenfield areas. But wanted to just put that into perspective to show the incremental, very large sums of funds that can be generated through that process, opposed to the capitalization of some of these expenses through impact fees, which I don't know who's in here to talk about what tonight, but that in some cases, some folks may have a very hard time stomaching and choking down those capitalized costs up front compared to development still paying their way, not being a rate-based assessment on existing customers, but to then just looking at the new customers moving forward. So thanks again for allowing us the opportunity to speak tonight, and look forward to following up.
As you close and I get the next speaker, the 50 cents you referred to, is that a property tax increase?
Yes, sir. So the question there, or the example there, instead of paying, and I'm using round numbers, so forgive me if I'm a little off, instead of paying approximately $2.15 per thousand on the millage rate that's currently at Berry Farms, suggesting possibly bumping that up to roughly $2.65, which would still be below what people are paying roughly inside Mac Hatcher because of the Franklin Special School District assessment. In comparison, Metro's Urban Service District is like $3.25, or, kind of again round numbers, but
I believe
once again, not
property
proposing
tax
that
can't be
across the
used
overall.
for this enterprise fund.
But they can through some of these special assessment districts. So, and I think that's what we're looking at on a state level with the legislation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron Crutcher, followed by John Besser, followed by Philip Cantrell.
I am Ron Crutcher. I live at 1324 Adams Street in Franklin. My wife Joyce and I are a shareholder representing one SFEU. We pay one water and one sewer bill, no irrigation add-on, and we're following this proposed ordinance to increase the charges for water and sewer. As we understand the information previously presented, and again tonight, there will be an increase in the water and sewer impact fees paid to obtain a building permit for new construction. New construction will be paid for, if this ordinance goes through, by increasing these impact fees. We are for this increasing the fees and not increasing the charges to the existing users. We understand that both the water and sewer treatment plant on Claude Yates Drive and the water treatment plant on Lewisburg Pike have been greatly expanded and presently have excess capacities for new SFEUs. However, the demand for this new development will require a new water treatment plant on land already owned by the City of Franklin off South Carruthers Parkway, and a new wastewater treatment plant somewhere in the southeast quadrant of the city limits. These two new plants will have to be financed by bonds sold by the City of Franklin. We assume that the present two expansions to the wastewater treatment and to the wastewater treatment plant are being paid for by the present customers through the present rates and by new impact fees collected for the sale of excess capacity that have been built into these plants. The staff of the water management is to be commended for the research and computation for the data to support this effort to develop this equitable, and I emphasize equitable, system of rate increases. And I want to thank all the BOMA for the time that you all put in directing our cities, and you've done a heck of a job of it.
Good evening. I'm John Besser, 532 Ridgestone Drive in Forest Crossing. And tonight I'm here on behalf of the Housing Commission, whom I'm currently the chair. We are happy about the growth and the opportunities that it brings to us. And with that, we've had a tremendous increase in the demand for housing. The development community has done a fabulous job at providing solutions and options for just about every price range that this demand has brought to us. The one area that is lacking is in that area of homes that priced about $450,000 and less. And those that could afford that make about $80,000 a year, give or take. So as we continue to talk about growth and all the opportunities that brings with you, I'm asking the BOMA to consider ways of making it more attractive for affordable housing, for workforce housing to be built. If we look across what has been provided, we are certainly providing those home options at well over $1 million, as given by the last average home sale price in Williamson County at about 1.2. What this would bring to us is having our workforce live closer to us. Right now, we can see the traffic in just about any direction around Franklin. It's almost a parking lot going south or east or west, depending on the time of the day. So we could have our workers that support all of us closer, and that would bring more to our city, provide a lot more options for us. So as you consider your deliberations, I just asked, consider some type of sliding scale for single-family unit homes that might have a less of an influence on the sale price of those homes in that lower end of pricing. Thank you for your consideration, and I also want to thank you for taking on these difficult decisions. God bless you on those. Thank you.
Philip Cantrell. Oh, there you go. Good seeing you.
I like to hide in the back. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Board Alderman. Thank you for letting me speak here for just a few minutes. My name is Philip Cantrell. I want to talk specifically how this decision process, the sewer impact fee, how it addressed the project known as 555 Franklin Road project specifically. For background, my family and I reside at 103 Windsor Way, which is directly behind Clearview Baptist Church. I'm the founder and CEO of Benchmark Realty, as well as being one of 3 trustees of Clearview Baptist. The other 2 are here tonight as well. We are the seller of the land involved in this project. In my role at Benchmark, supervising over 1,500 licensed brokers, I have consulted on and participated in numerous development projects over the years. Because of that background, I was asked by Clearview to represent their interests in the sale of the portion of our land there on Franklin Road. I agreed, happy to invest my talents in the effort, and have done so quite extensively for over 2 years now. In the interest of total transparency, you should know that my efforts are 100% pro bono. I tell you that not to seek accolades, but to simply clear the air of any inaccurate thoughts. I'm here to ask you to understand that this sale process and this project is of critical importance to Clearview Baptist Church. Success here allows the church to become completely debt-free, provide additional funding for deferred campus maintenance, and facilitate a much more active missions effort. It will literally impact the future trajectory of this church, and there are many people here tonight with a strong desire to see these things come to pass. Clearview chose this developer from 6 or 7 potentials, not only because of an outstanding national reputation, but because of their proven integrity and character. Frankly, in my many years of real estate experience, I truly have never encountered such a high degree of professionalism. But to be frank, I'm surprised they're still trying to move forward with a senior living project because of all the many challenges they've encountered. To begin with, a major portion of the facility had to be redesigned because a highly desirable cottages feature was not allowed. Next, there was a parking lot issue requiring a delay and appearance before the Board of Zoning Appeals to address the concern over parking along the sides of the property, even though the property's southern boundary faces the large north parking lot of Clearview. After that, the developer was informed they would be required to widen Franklin Road or to be restricted to a north-only entrance or a south-only exit. And then, mixed in amongst these items, the gargantuan issue arose where they learned that they would be required to replace a sewer line which runs from Gateway Village area down through some wonderfully landscaped backyards in the Jackson Lake community, on down through to Mallory Station Road. Apparently, this gravity line was laid nearly level so that its capacity has been greatly diminished in a relatively short period of time. That was a requirement of the project. Over the past 14 months, the developer has already been required to agree to over $2.1 million in a variety of public fees, including a staff-produced estimate that sewer impact fee would be $141,750, plus over $2.3 million in off-site infrastructure improvement projects, including nearly $2 million to correct the failing sewer line. Then on October 5th, this developer learned of the proposed increase in the sewer impact fee just days after staff had confirmed the original budgeted $140,000 impact fee number. According to the engineering consultants, the new calculation would raise the sewer impact fee to a staggering $2.1 million. To be clear, City of Franklin staff did inform me this calculation was incorrect, but so far have been unresponsive to my request to show me the correct math. Regardless, even if the amount is half as much as calculated by the engineers, it's still too much for this project at this stage of budgeting. To be direct, this increased fee is the straw that broke the camel's back. I should say is breaking the camel's back. With a base of $2.1 million in various fees plus $2.3 million in required off-site improvements, including the sewer line and widening Franklin Road, plus yet another $2 million in new sewer impact fee, the total now sits at a staggering $6.5 million before a single permit can be filed. The result is this project is dead before it can gain project permits unless we can get some affirmative relief very soon. Well, let's look at the macro view for just a second, if we may. If this is approved as recommended, meaning the full $16,000 fee, it effectively kills all development and building in the city of Franklin and completely crushes property land values. Of utmost importance to Clearview is that this project dies. If this project dies, our church is irreparably damaged because this land can never be sold for its highest and best use value. That is a huge problem for every single landowner in the city of Franklin who may ever wish to monetize their property holdings. As a concerned private citizen and a community business leader, I implore you to think about such unintended consequences and view them through the filter of the Fifth Amendment's Takings Clause, which addresses government agency actions that restrict or diminish property value without fair compensation. Setting that aside, the bottom line for us is that this project has been unanimously approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning Commission, and the development plan is unanimously approved by this board, all with zero public opposition. The site plan pre-approval submittal was made earlier today. The developers focused on meeting a December 12th submittal deadline that should lead to FMPC site approval plan approval. But what happens beyond December is very much up in the air at this time. This team has exerted a Herculean effort and a lot of funding to get to this point. So please, please, don't put us in the position where all this was wasted. As I've offered repeatedly, I remain available to lend whatever credibility and skill I possess to help this board work through finding a long-term solution. But Clearview's need is immediate and concerns this specific project. Our developers clearly said they can only stay in the project a couple of more months, so our window for action is very short unless we obtain some sort of grandfathering or variance. This project is going to die very soon. I urge you to contemplate all I presented in your discussions. I appreciate your work very much. The developers representative, Sean Hunt, and I remain available to answer questions if you need us. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, the next three, and the last three, Dave McGowan. Is Dave still here? Glenn McGee, and then Gary Parks. Glenn McGee says no, so Mr. Parks.
Thank you, Mayor Moore and Board of Mayor and Aldermen and staff. Just a couple of quick comments. I think everybody's kind of presented a lot of questions to think about. As we all know, there's no free lunch. Not today and not tomorrow. Growth requires infrastructure. Infrastructure costs money. That's no great surprise to the development community. I think coming up with a sensible plan to fund forward development is a good idea, but as the previous speaker spoke, you do have to pay attention to what effects that has on the various different projects and how it calculates. We have a project in the pipeline that we've been working on for quite some time, and it will evolves into a bigger discussion too about the whole fee structure and how to handle fees and fee structures in the city of Franklin. Our project's quite large. At the last calculation, I think our anticipated total city fees were about $18 million. It's a lot of money. I haven't been able to assess exactly what these changes will cost to our project because I couldn't quite figure out I can figure out the cost of the water and sewer, but the mutation to a equivalent single-family unit calculation is unclear to me at present since that's been published, so I can't really put a finger on that. In some of the calculations in the presentations, I would urge you to think through. There's kind of this implication that the current base of the city, us included, does not benefit at all from new development, which typically isn't the case. So there is some increase in the total economic activity, in property taxes and all kinds of other facets through new development, which benefits everybody, not just the new people coming, but the people who are already here. I would urge you we're involved in development throughout the United States, and we've used some of these and are using some of these funding tools that are enabled in other states. So if that becomes an option, I would urge you, because they do work. And at the end of the day, there's no free lunch, but the end user always pays the freight at the end of the day. So whether it's a person paying their water and sewer bill or a person paying their mortgage, at the end of the day, whatever action you take here ends up being borne by the end consumer of the community that we live in, which is one of the difficult things that I think the city of Franklin has on its plate is affordability. And so that's going to continue to be an issue that we have to grapple with. That's all I've got. You got your work cut out for you. Happy to help in any way we can. We've been here for a long time and have been exposed to a lot of these development tools, special funding tools, and happy to lend a hand where we can.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Okay. Oh, I think, yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think staff is looking for some direction, particularly as far as that first element. Sure, go ahead.
One of the comments made was that there was a study made in 2010 that's estimated the sewer capacity needs at 12 million gallons for 2040. Is that accurate? Do you remember the comment?
Yeah, I can't cite
need to
exactly
look
where
at-
that's being referenced, but we have 12 million gallons a day now.
Right.
Our daily average is north of 10 million, I think, a day coming in now. We're adding 4 million of capacity, and what we've projected at this point is that it appears the 8 million makes a lot of sense. Mark talked about if you just did 4 million, you've really already got about 60% of that in your system that you'd be bringing to that new plant. So it's again, it's something we're continuing to validate. It was done in that planning process, but it's also been reviewed again. We've done that internally with planning staff, and it's being further evaluated and validated as part of this project overall to make sure that that's the right sizing.
Well, I want to make sure that I understood the comment that was made up there so that nobody else misunderstands. I understood that person to say that in 2010, there was a wastewater treatment plant and a study was made that we would not need more than 12 million gallons up until 2040. And is that not?
He referred to figure 4-12 in the IWRP report, and so.
Yeah, I'd have to look at what he's referring to, but the reality is, when that plan was done, we already had 12 million of capacity.
Exactly.
And there's a threshold that actually TDEC requires you to look at your long-term planning when you have reached 80% of capacity. So we were at that point when we did that planning, so that number relative to where we were then and where we are now doesn't seem to reflect the reality.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Alderman Hanson, you haven't been able to speak, please.
So the one thing nobody's discussed here tonight is, are we really going to have the availability of water that we need? That's one part of this conversation I've not heard, and that is probably an equal concern. Are we going to have enough of a water supply to fill this capacity that we're building? And that is a very valid concern. Especially right now, it's a very valid concern, but looking forward, are we going to have enough of a water supply to meet the demands that we need? Number two is, perfect example that Philip Cantrell just mentioned, is commercial loans are planned way out. There's no opportunity, as you guys said, to pivot when we realize, oops, can't do this, they're not pulling permits, our development is falling off. It's not like they can turn around and come back and get back in the game. You get one chance to do this right. You don't get to go back and get your investors. You don't get to go back and reapply for a commercial loan. It's done. So not only are we losing that, we'll never get it back, and now we're going to be trying to catch up on other things. So this quarterly report is not an accurate way to resolve this issue because it's gone. That bus has already passed us. It's not coming back. And then we're going to get farther and farther and farther behind. So I disagree that pivoting is not the way to do this. I truly believe that we've got to grandfather some people in. I know staff does not like this, but the reality is a very volatile lending market, a very unstable development market right now, And if we're going to have any development over the next couple of years in the market that we're in, we're going to have to consider some people already grandfathered in to do some of this. And I don't know what that's going to look like, but we need to come up with something because it is something we have to do. We told them yes, they had some numbers. We need to stick to those numbers and not make this drastic change. I can't approve any of this till I know we have absolutely exhausted every opportunity for public-private partnerships, for utility districts, from state-level funding. I don't think, in my mind, I'm nowhere near ready to say yes on any of this. I'm not having any problems with the residential amount. It's these larger amounts I'm having a problem with. But I have to know, as a representative of our citizens and taxpayers, that we as a city have done our job to exhaust every single opportunity to relieve them of an onerous burden from the developer, from the water utility payer, from the taxpayer. I think we need to look at all those mechanisms. I know Eric's mentioned in the past a possible property tax increase. If people know where it's going and it's modest, they typically are okay with that, but they don't want a surprise, they want a huge increase. We have to get outside the government box on a lot of this. We have to look at what's working in other places, what can we do that's most effective, even if it takes a little bit longer to do it. We owe that to our citizens, we owe that to our future growth, to exercise all that. And maybe in the end, after we've exhausted all those, we find out that no, this is absolutely the only thing that's ever going to work, and we're stuck with it. But we don't know until we go down that path, and I'm begging you to go down that path.
So let me address one thing there, just because you raised the question of water supply. I just want to give you a little bit of background in terms of how that is looked at. We are fortunate in that we're a city that has two different water supplies. We pull water from the Harpeth that we treat and distribute, and then we have water that comes from the Cumberland that's treated by Harpeth Valley Utility District and is transmitted down to Franklin. As it stands now, about 2/3 of our water comes from the Cumberland, from Harpeth Valley Utility District. Obviously a large water source. We provide projections of our long-term demands to them. They have sized their system and their capacity accordingly. And then we've done what we've done to upgrade both the treatment capacity, but especially the treatment process at the Franklin plant that, again, provides about 1/3 of our capacity. So obviously, other water districts provide service to some of our citizens, probably about, 4 other water districts. They all pull water from Harpeth Valley Utility District. None of them provide treatment as we do. So they have one source, and they do the same thing we do in terms of projecting needs and demand out over multiple years and sharing that. And Harpeth Valley Utility District does a very regular check-in with us to see what's changed or what needs to be modified with that. So there's a pretty significant amount of planning, and those in the Franklin District in particular have a redundancy that most in the region don't have in terms of having multiple sources. So I think generally that is a place I would say we're pretty comfortable in our ability over time to meet those, especially in the district we control. I don't want to speak for all the other districts in terms of what all of their plans are, but capacity is pretty well thought through and planned for both at our local plant and the more regional services. So if that helps, to just give you that piece as an immediate response to that question.
We've got Alderman Potts and then Alderman Blanton. I'm going to let you be the rapper with a bow.
Well, then I'll be brief because the closer is ready. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, and Alderman Hanson, I think those were some good points. A couple of those were the questions that I even had listed here. I do think that we're seeing a little bit of a theme, and that is, as we've discussed it as a board, we've heard some from the public that we put the cart before the horse, or we swung and we missed in not providing the formula up front in its totality, so that there was some clarity, because we heard that, and if we didn't, then, and I know it's in the works and we're going to be publishing it soon, I think that's that's one of the things that needs to be done. I think the other part that needs to also be done, and we heard it just a few moments ago from Mr. Parks, and it was the passion and the focus that, and the time, energy, and effort that everybody's put in from the church's perspective, and that's just one example. I've got concern, even though the rollout was over a 4-year period, starting in March, for 4 years. There's new. How are we defining new growth? Are we going to grandfather people in, and how are we going to do that? Are we basing it on somebody that's already been approved, somebody that's in the pipeline, somebody that's, at what point are we going to have a cutoff? But I feel like it's unfair right now, based on the information that we have, and based on where a group like that's already, expressed all the details that they've shared, that, it just shut their entire project down in its totality. And then, I've got to stop right there on that one. I think the big picture right here, and I really want to commend staff, is this is such a challenging project. And the time, energy, and effort that's been put in is greatly appreciated. I feel like there's a lot of great data that's been shared. I know that the FAQ document that's been provided got some great feedback on that. I think tonight we're going to have some more questions that are going to surface. I've got some here, and in the interest of time, not going to go into them. I know other aldermen may have the same. So I would actually ask that we go to that next stage of having another FAQ to make sure that the public has everything that they need so that we can make the decisions. And it's right. This is not going to be an easy decision as we move forward. But I know that we can partner together to get it there. With that, I'll turn it over to the closer here.
When I first got elected in 2011, I walked into the Integrated Water Resource Plan and was overwhelmed. Much like you probably are a year in with us implementing this. I do think I appreciate the staff putting together this opportunity up here where things kind of slowly build. But I do think we're doing an injustice to people who have a concept of coming in of what their fee structures are going to be. And grandfathering is a where do you stop, where do you start? And I know that's a concern on how we identify what's appropriate. Adam talking about a tax increase. It's interesting, as an elected official, we've not raised our property taxes in longer than we've raised our impact fees. And a lot of times the impact fees are the way that we are able to not raise our property taxes. And I'm looking at Jim Lackey. But sometimes, not that you have anything to do with that, Jim, but I do think sometimes the bold decisions that we need to make as a board sometimes are to kind of untie our hands behind our backs, that those property taxes do help us and not raise our fees. We've done a lot of work, Michelle, and all of you all in your department. I appreciate that. And we're always going to come in behind you and go, but did you think about this? And you're like, oh my gosh, we were almost there. We've got some more work to do. And who are we being fair to? Are we being fair to the developer? Are we being fair to the builder? Are we being fair to the citizens? I think we've got to figure out all of that in one big bailiwick. But it is hard to go to bed at night that knowing that a decision that we make may kill a project of something that they've been working on for years. So I think there's more work to be done. I do appreciate us beating together on a Monday night after Thanksgiving to give us the time that it needs, but I think we probably need to have more time still. So
This is just like gravy on dressing.
I'm going home. Good night.
Quick comment, Alderman
Yeah.
Berger.
I'll follow the closer.
Remember, quick.
I'm really concerned with the ability for some of these people to move ahead, especially nonprofits and churches. Not that I don't care about the development community at all, but it's really important that Alderman Blanton said it well, that it is, they've got caught here and they're in limbo. And I know every one of you, if I asked you right now, if you're in a phase of trying to sign contracts, right? You're all shaking your heads. You're in limbo. Those people are not signing your contracts, are they? No, you've told me that. And you are stuck because you don't know how much this is going to cost you. This may shut some of you down. It obviously will shut the church down. It will shut a few of you down and will also kick a lot of you back out. But I know that a lot of you are trying to sign and you can't. And this is, I don't know what we can do, but we're going to have to possibly talk about grandfathering some of you all in and what phase you're at, because it's really critical. What Alderman Hanson said, I totally agree with. I am so not there yet either. And I think we have to exhaust every avenue we have. And you all have done such a remarkable job bringing all this to us. This is not easy for you. It's not easy for any of us, but you've done a lot of the hard work. You've done most of all the hard work, and it's very difficult. When you first brought this to us, I thought, why did you bring this to us? Because you know we can't vote on this. We know this is not sustainable. It is not sustainable. But you went back to the drawing board when you heard some of our comments, and you brought us some other options, and you brought us other things. And I think, again, Alderman Hanson said it well. I think you need to go back. We need to exhaust all the avenues we can, whatever they are, whether the grants, the state, maybe implementing whatever kind of districts we need to do. But no matter what we do, we raise the fees. We talked about affordable housing here tonight. You raise these fees, everybody knows when the fees get raised, it's put on the people who move in, whether it's commercial, your people that sign your contracts and move into your retail, your restaurants, your commercial, your office, whatever, or your residents. They pay the bill. And so we have got to do our due diligence a little bit more, and I think we have a lot of work yet to do on this, but I really do appreciate where we are, because we are much further ahead than we were before, and this meeting was so critical. I appreciate you, all of us, having this meeting and taking the time to let people speak their heart and speak the information, because this information that you gave us tonight, these are critical things. And Adam Bellish, wherever you are, you brought us some excellent concerns, but thank you so much.
Alderman Barnhill, you've been designated to close.
To close it, okay.
Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
I want to say one quick thing about affordable housing if we
Okay.
Let me ask you this. Under that proposal there, how much more will they pay?
They would pay, well,
Right now, they're paying $141,000 on a $3,400 tap fee. At $6,800, they would pay $280,000? Well, that's, how much?
Instead of 141, ones who get permits.
Step up there. As long as you get permits before January of '24.
about 600.
No,
As long as we get permits.
2024.
Go ahead. Who am I speaking to?
Me.
Mr. Vice Mayor, we are going to be pulling permits in 2023.
Right.
So, as I understand the progressive chart that was put up, we would pay that first tier amount, provided all of our not all of our permits, our initial permit is pulled before, I believe it's January or March of 2020.
January of 2024.
Yes, yes. If that's the case, and it should be from a timing standpoint, instead of 141,000, it's 862,000. That's a six-fold increase.
Do you mind looking at that?
And they're also doing a $2 million increase of sewer line that would arguably, could that not be offset? Could those be offset? Could that improvement offset this? Because this is not a regular.
It is a unique element of this, but it is capacity they need to build what they want to build.
But so does everyone else. I mean, I guess.
It does not have a broader benefit and
Maybe look into
broader
that
impact.
before we.
Excuse me, Idmo.
Look into
We can
that.
give you some more detail. It's just,
And I'll give you some.
I understand.
I'll
it's
give
not
you
the same thing.
I'll
but
give
yeah.
you some right now.
Okay.
That $2 million sewer upgrade builds in capacity for us and 2 more projects larger than ours.
It's true.
2 more projects larger than, and we're footing the bill. But we've agreed to do it. We've worked that out. We just can't do all of this. And these impact fees are sewer related. And the staff gave you a definition of what impact fees are for, and it's to fix stuff like we're fixing. So,
Maybe explore that just in more detail, but
We'll take
And do you want to address the 501c3?
Well,
Affordable housing.
I did want to touch on the affordable housing piece because it's come up a couple times. The board has already acted in a Title 21, it's up there, of the municipal code to provide the ability to offset costs for affordable and workforce housing in the realm of impact fees, water, wastewater, road impact, and parkland. So you've already provided that. Now, you do it by project and you approve what you're going to replace with general fund dollars is typically how we've done it. Because, you know, you're not shifting more burden to other ratepayers. You're saying the city values affordable and workforce housing enough that it's willing to put some money in to offset that development impact. So you've already provided that mechanism. You know, we may need to refine that further as this is a different structure. But the way we've done it to this point is you identify it up front, and then we budget it as we anticipate it coming on and impacting, you know, a deficit in whatever impact fee it might be applicable to. So some of it's based on the timing of that development, but you already have a mechanism in place that helps you offset impact fees in how they relate to affordable and workforce housing. And you just did that like a year or 2 ago, 2 years ago, guys.
Okay, everybody's wrapping up.
So where do we go from here? What's the action that comes out of this tonight? I hate having another meeting. We always have meetings. Our whole life's a meeting. But really, where do we go from here? What's the next action that we have?
Well, I'm looking for board guidance. We've made a recommendation to you specifically related to at least doing Phase 1 while we work on other options. Again, it ties to a cost you've already incurred. So
let's
the-
give some, can we give some feedback real quick? Because
The longer you wait, the longer we don't collect money and you shift more burden to the ratepayers. It just naturally happens. So some general direction on that. We are glad to continue to research options, et cetera. That component, I mean, you've already got a fee that covers that initial component, that initial buy-in component in the sewer realm. And you're just adding that component of what you've already put in there to that calculation. I'd like you to at least consider that and give us some guidance, knowing that we continue to work on these other elements, especially as it relates to the new plant. The other piece you've already invested in, and the longer you wait, the less you don't collect towards that investment.
But where do we leave the people that are in limbo right now, especially the church?
Well, if you make a decision on the implementation, you've given them rate certainty for at least some period of time. And that's what I heard the one gentleman talk about.
No, they're out,
Well,
right?
I don't know. It sounds like it's a $600,000 increase. I can't speak for them. I didn't hear that either way.
2 million?
No, sir, sit down. We're
No,
not having this
the fir- the-
discussion now.
We talked about the first phase. That's what I'm asking about. That's not a $2 million increase. Okay?
That's right. It was just, he just said 600,000.
Oh, okay.
I think that's 600, if that's the right number. I think that sounds about right.
And can we explore the offset for the $2.1 million sewer expansion?
We will explore that. Again, it's not exactly the same thing, but we understand the question. And we do offsets sometimes, but they don't necessarily tie to that type
So
of work.
Eric,
but we-
you're asking us for,
tonight.
it's on slide 19.
Not tonight.
You're asking for direction, though. On slide 19, it's the March 2023 current impact fee plus the 25% proposed impact fee is what you're asking us to move
The
forward.
proposal,
correct?
yeah, I gave you is, this is the 4-year plan that we submitted as a recommendation. This is the first time we've really been able to at least even talk it through with you. And that first element is about a $3,200 increase.
Is that beholden to the other part?
Not necessarily.
I would suggest that we
And you can control the timing of when you
The
even do it.
timing, yeah.
You know, those are dates we suggested, but if you want to make it July, you will make it January of next year, pick it. But in some ways, doing nothing, especially on one that you've already spent real money on, I think that most uncertainty is around the new plant that's 10 years out. How do we assess that and what do we work with that?
Can we
The other,
get it
the other
on
investment
December-
you've already made.
Can we get it on December 13th agenda?
Certainly can
Because
do a
this
follow-up
isn't
discussion.
voting. I mean, we're giving you
Right.
direction.
There's some band support for that. All right.
You certainly can, we can put it on work session, we can put it on both, whatever you want to do. If you want to give us feedback on that timing, if you want to pick a date that it goes into effect, that adds time frame and at least some level of certainty over a period of time that folks can factor in.
What I don't understand, though, is if we implement the first phase of that, okay? Does that, I'm sorry to pick on Clearview, but they're a good example right now tonight since they spoke and everything. Or Adam Bellish, I don't care, I'll just pick on somebody else. But if we do implement the first phase of that, does that beholden them to all the other phases if we kick those
No.
phases in?
What I'm suggesting is do that first phase. Pick the date you want it to be effective, and that's the decision you've made to
Yeah.
this point.
Yeah.
And then you give yourself some additional time to especially consider that 10,000 plus
increases.
element that relates to the future plan. I think, I would suggest we keep moving as much as we can on that, because, again, we're working and planning, and there's a lot that goes on over the next 8 to 10 years to try to support that. So, I mean, you can get yourself some time, but I would suggest we look at decisions at some point, but the only decision you're making is that one increase.
So question.
You are not doing the other
Okay.
dates.
So question,
at
if
this
we
point.
did that, then that still gives us opportunity, do we not have still an opportunity to look at all these other possible districts or grants or other things with the state or whatever?
Gives you more time to study additional
That we
options.
can add in there later, that not maybe for the first phase, but later. Is that
Right,
correct?
correct,
I am
correct.
understanding it correctly?
First phase is Claude Yates.
Yeah, I
That's
just-
already
It's the
happened,
existing
just
project.
like
Yeah.
the existing project.
Yeah,
We're
I know
making
this-
people pay for Claude Yates. It's reasonable. Now, I would say that please study very specifically the offset for the fees for Clearview. And they make very valid arguments. I know that could be far-reaching, but let's put the pen to paper on that. I don't think, I wouldn't look at another fee increase until we finish the Goose Creek study, did an Envision Franklin update, and then updated our IWRP, because there are some discrepancies in the current IWRP and what we're doing right now. And I don't think we need to look at another increase until we get all those plans aligned, because the I'm not going to go into it right now because everybody wants to go home. But the reality is that we've pushed up, we're not following the strategy schedule in our IWRP. That's fine, but I think it would behoove us not to take Envision Franklin, Goose Creek, update the IWRP, and maybe y'all have done that internally, and that's probably what's happened, and I get that. But we can't make another increase in sewer fees until we have a better idea, and that's going to buy us time for the state, yeah.
So Eric, along those same lines, I just want to make sure that the dates that you said, even though you said we could pick any date that we're talking about, but right now, as we look at this on slide 19, you've recommended not January 1 because we've got to vote this through. So you picked, or someone picked March 2023. So if there's any specific date or month or something that is where this needs to be done by, we need to know.
There's not necessarily a deadline. It was just looked at the timing of your actions,
Okay.
et cetera, and when was the quickest effective date. So that's, again, a choice you can make and get to make. So tell us what you think that should be, and that can be reflected in what we ask you to act on, and at least that initial step. So if you want that to be July, you want that to be January, so think about that. And that can be
And it could be tied to
that
the
can be a
pain
fill in
point
the
of-
blank.
Of when funds have to be transferred. If you said there's a break point where where this has to be done. We're already paying for this, correct?
You've already, it's in the ground now and being completed by sometime next year.
All right.
So you've already committed.
And already borrowed the money.
Yep, and you've already borrowed over $100 million from the state revolving loan fund.
Last comment, Clyde. You're still the closer.
Why can we not have a date on this? I mean, basically, a lot of this conversation has been based upon Clearview's issue. If we did the March 2023 date, you move it out to January of '24. That's a full year, and plus another month. That's 13 months. If they can't get that done by then lo and behold, bless, as Margaret would say, bless their heart. But I think we need to look at that schedule. And I am really, really concerned when we start trying to say we can raise property taxes to offset water and sewer. Cannot.
My point was impact fee. We end up making our money by raising fees. I wasn't trying to be specific to water, but yet we have yet to raise our property taxes, even the slightest.
When's the last time we raised it?
Well, when the reappraisal happened in 2016, we held our rate, but that did serve as essentially
did
about a
ser-
dime
yeah.
increase in property tax.
So
Because your rate
2016?
would have gone down, but you held the rate.
Oh, it wasn't a wash.
All right.
On the
I've had
wash.
enough final comments.
Go ahead.